in 2025, there is a similar evolution taking place. And it really started with stablecoins, which is that the dollar, which was already now synthetic, became tokenized on the blockchain. So now the dollar is now digitally represented. And that's what a stablecoin is, because it's backed by treasuries, but it's still basically just a digital dollar. Well, Ethereum and Bitcoin are public tokens. And so their price isn't going to be purely anchored on fundamentals. They're going to be reflecting investors' perceptions, because both Bitcoin and Ethereum are not mature platforms. Their best utility and growth and innovation are in the years ahead, right? So we're 10 years in, but there's more growth in the future. The percentage of market share of crypto of total assets is so small that we know that mathematically that's true. Whenever when you have something that has a hyper growth on ramp and you're discounting the future, it's going to be very volatile. So does Ethereum's price going from 4,800 to 2,800, that is a staggering decline, but that probably is a minor change in 2030 fundamentals that is being priced and repriced by investors. And that's why there's hyper volatility. Rough timing range, his downside target, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, was 2,500 for ETH. So I think we're so close to that. It would be ideal actually for us to actually bleed to that level, because then that is creating what he calls a buy setup. A bottom in prices for him is when the last seller has sold, so that a stock or crypto no longer falls on bad news. That's what he thinks makes a bottom. So it would, I think, be a better situation to see crypto prices bleed lower to 2,500. But it could reverse at any time, because markets don't have to do what ends up being an ideal scenario. Well, Chris, the one thing that I would say that maybe isn't reflected in price is the number of account holders that got wiped out on October 10th. And I think and we may not even hear from them because, they've been liquidated. To me, that's probably, now that could be someone's simply saying there was just too much leverage. That's why leverage is hitting crypto harder. That's a possible explanation. But to me, again, especially working with DeMark team, I think that there is something that is causing a lot continued leaking, but we're close to the end of that leaking.
Yeah. My sense is that we're going through a flippening right now. It's not the traditional flippening of ETH market cap surpassing Bitcoin. It's, to your point, it's the retail got hit. Retail ebbs and flows. Retail's ebbing right now. But the real flippening is that institutions are coming back into the market. And I think Bitmine and others are going to be a big part of making that happen. And so, I personally think you have this, kind of this gap period.
You can't really do that on Bitcoin. So you have to build it on a smart contract, L1 or L2. And the reason I think Ethereum is going to be one of the leading platforms is, number one, its sheer size. It is by far much bigger than the number 2 or number 3 L1s. It has a huge and growing developer community that is really dedicated, and it's global. So I think it's a true, robust community with actual known values. And it's a neutral blockchain with 100% uptime. So I think that this becomes one place where it's going to be easier for people to create innovative products. So for instance, let's say JP Morgan or Goldman want to just do tokenized stocks in 24/7. And they want to control as much of that as they want, as they can on a blockchain, because you lose a bit of control. They may not necessarily say they want to do a lot of this on Ethereum, but then someone's going to come along and create a product that does do this, and it's supported by a community, and then it gathers all the liquidity. That's exactly what happened with something like Polymarket, right? On a prediction market basis, where it came natively out of the blockchain and today broke out into the real world and is, look, it's the most cited way to actually understand events in the future. I mean, it's the Polymarket is the closest to having a crystal ball today. Like, it is the closest to tomorrow's newspaper, and it's a native blockchain product. It didn't come out of an existing Wall Street desk that created this product. It was created by builders. So that's why I think Ethereum, and it doesn't have to be only Ethereum succeeding. I think Ethereum, there will be room for others, but I can see the clearest roadmap for Ethereum succeeding.
Yeah, on Polymarket, man, I've been watching it like crazy. Just, I guess, really my last question here is, how do you see macro impacting you in the space?
Yeah, macro is actually really a big deal, Chris. Crypto was the first really to sniff out, and it's going to be responding to a Fed, right? And if the Fed remains hawkish and executes policy error, that's bad for crypto prices. That's why it's really important for anyone involved in crypto understand that what the Fed's going to do is a big deal. I think the Fed is in a very difficult spot, because if there wasn't what looks to be as political interference, I think the Fed would be cutting without question now, because bond market is showing future inflation expectations are falling, and that means that if monetary policy doesn't adjust, its real rates are getting tighter. We're actually putting more tightening into the economy. But as you know, the Fed has to make sure its actions don't look like they've been politically driven.
Yeah.
And that, not just the market's perception, right? Because people tend to think of it as, oh, well, this is the bond market or stock market's conclusion. That's not really what I think that what the Fed's concerned about. It's really the integrity of the organization. They have 30,000 or more employees, and each of them is seeing this relentless attack from the White House. So I think to the extent that the Fed governors and the voting members know that it's the morale of the institution that's at stake. So this is why the Fed is even more guarded in their actions and much more deliberate in their messaging, because they don't want anything they do to look politically motivated. And unfortunately, that's been bad for markets, because the markets have interpreted that as the Fed is hawkish. And I mean, they do sound hawkish. So I think it means that there's going to be an alignment later months when inflation is fallen enough, and the Fed can now make cuts where it's no longer viewed as politically motivated. I think for anyone who's involved in crypto for a long time knows this, and so there's many who are new, but crypto has declines, and we're not necessarily in a bear market, and it feels terrible. In fact, that's what you have to be mindful of, is that it's a hyper volatile space, so it feels terrible now. But just like in 2024, crypto felt terrible for many months, and then we've had these big moves.
Yeah, you have the meltdown, then you have the melt up. Volatility works in both directions. Before I let you go, any price targets for ETH?
Yeah, I think, in the near term, there is downside, maybe to 2,500, but that's minor compared to the upside of trying to discount a supercycle. So we think ETH can be 7,000, 9,000 by the end of January, and that's a huge recovery move, but that's also pretty typical of what could happen in the fourth quarter.
I hope you're right, sir.
Crypto faithful.